Cool. All right, let me get this out to the subscribers.
I was listening to a podcast yesterday that Joe Rogan had with this CIA agent that's his friend. He was ex-CIA, but they're always CIA forever. And there's a guy named Mike Baker. He has a show on, I think, Discovery about like black ops and secrets and shit like that. And which is funny. It's like, all right, you have this show talking about secrets and all that, and you're in the CIA. You guys don't talk about your secrets, but he always brings them on, and they're pretty good, like pals and shit. And Joe Rogan busts his balls all the time, which is funny because he's like, you're always profiling me. Like he'll say, "It's like, you come," because everyone says that he's Joe Rogan's handler, so it's funny. But Joe Rogan was saying that he has a doctor friend. He says that his friend, he's like one of the smartest people he knows, like one of the smartest. And Joe Rogan knows like even Elon Musk, like he has like a very large portfolio of people that he knows. And he said that this doctor, he took the vaccine, right? But he said that he studied the vaccines, and the one that he took was the Russian Sputnik one because he said it was the best one out of all of them.
The competition.
Very interesting. Very interesting, right?
Was this a recent episode?
Yeah, yesterday. It came out yesterday.
Yeah, because we are seeing, this almost like Sputnik moment now for the vaccine, right? Which countries are creating them? Which countries are adopting them? I joked with you like last week saying we should create T-shirts based on what manufacturer it was. Team Moderna, Team Pfizer, Team Russian, Team China, So it's interesting. I mean, obviously we'll have to wait and see how all of them work in the short term to long term. It's still very new on everything that's going on right now.
Yeah, I still don't trust it.
Yeah. All right, cool. So we got 9 seconds left. We've got a couple people on the live stream right now. So I think I'm just going to go ahead and get us kicked off here. What's going on, everyone? Thank you for joining us again. My name is Joe Rapp. This is Mike Fig. And
What's up?
We are the hosts of the Nonconformists. Today is March 11th, 2021. And we've already got a chat here. So you'll notice we're streaming across 3 platforms today. We're streaming across Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. So you've got links in the show notes. You can click those and subscribe. If you like what you hear, go ahead and click the link to the email subscription newsletter. Sign up for our newsletter. You'll get updates when we go live for episodes. And if you got any comments and if you want to chime in at all during the next hour or so, please do. That's one of the reasons why we kicked it back to live streams, is that so we can interact with the audience a little bit more. Mike, I've got the comments on my section. I'll let you know what's coming through. My cousin's already chatting a little bit with us. Danny, would you mop the fucking floor with China Giuseppe? Drag them into the dark ages. Well, Daniel, today we're going to be talking a lot about some history with China. We're going to be getting into it a little bit more. We've got a bunch of articles here, and we're going to be really having this discussion around China really starting to openly prepare themselves for war, essentially, in the future. They've just set up their new 5-year plan. Mike's got a lot of information on some of the Hong Kong stuff that's going on. And then we'll also talk about some stories that just came out over the past week showing that the Biden administration in the U.S. really hasn't changed much, right? We're still continuing the war machine. So again, if you like what you've heard and you like what you've seen in the past, you guys can't... I gotta change that. We're going right here. There we are. I got it to work now. You can head over to our website, thenonconformist.io, and you can subscribe right there with your email information. But
make sure .io.
.io. You know what, Mike? As time goes on, too, it's becoming really apparent that this whole brand, the Nonconformist, is morphing into a group of individuals that I thought I'd never hear from. I hear from a lot of people week by week now that comment me about the podcast or the newsletter information. They feel like they're not really agreeing with what's going on in society. So that's why we created this channel, and a lot of this is to document history as it happens and to talk about current events and real world topics that you won't hear on mainstream TV, you won't hear in the news. So we hope to enlighten people in that sense and just tell the world through our eyes.
Def.
So what's going on down there, Mike? How we doing?
Everything's good. It's a beautiful day. 66 degrees outside. I'm going to take the convertible out later. That's what you do when it hits 50 and 60 down up here in the north, right? You think it's summertime.
I just did some disc golf today for the first time, and it was definitely a little bit more strenuous than I really thought it would be. For those that don't know what disc golf is frisbee golf, and this was the first real time that I played, and this course was 18 holes. It was all throughout the woods over here locally where I'm at. It took about 2.5 hours to get done, but I was surprised. I was huffing and puffing. These lockdowns, I haven't really left the house much like everyone else, so it seems like it's like an eye opener now this spring how much damage I probably did to my body this winter.
Yeah, I know. Being sedentary, locked up at home is not really the best thing. Home, they're talking about open up the economy and all that shit, which is great. So that means we'll be more active going forward, right? There's a lot of different policies going around, but I know Connecticut, they're opening up completely, which is very interesting, them being more of a state that's a Democrat-ran state compared to, like, the Republican-ran states that are actually opening. They've been open the past, couple of weeks now? Some of them actually just recently, but New Jersey, New York, we're not sure how they're going to actually engage in this opening of the economy and all of that. There's a lot of rumors spreading that you have to have your vaccines to actually be able to not wear a mask in Democrat-led states. So that's going to be interesting as well. Let's see what happens.
Do you think people are going to start calling each other out now for that? Like, oh, you don't have a mask on. Did you get your vaccine?
Of course.
Did you get your vaccine?
They already do it with
Prove
the mask.
to me you got your vaccine.
You have people. So there's this video I saw on TikTok, right? And it was this guy that had a mask on, but the mask was the print of the mask was his lower mouth, like his chin and his mouth. So from a little bit of afar, it looks like he has it looks like he has part of his mask on, and it was hilarious because this Karen came up to him and she's like, "Why don't you have your mask on properly on and all this shit?" And the girl's boyfriend was like, "Please stop, you're embarrassing me." And the guy was like, "I have my mask on." And then he went close, and she looked closer, and she saw it, and she was like pissed, and she's like, "Why do you do that?" And she was just like being, literally a bitch. She was being a bitch.
Yeah.
And it just shows how crazy people are, that they're just going nuts on others. I wish if I was a real prick, I would just go around and yell at people that don't have an N95 mask on. Because literally, the N95 mask is the only one that actually protects against COVID-19. So, that would be a funny, change of events if people actually did that. Just went around, I put on an N95 mask. Because if you want to be scientific, that's what you should be wearing, right?
Right.
But we're just a crazy nation right now. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, and that ties into some of our conversation today, especially with China really rising. While the U.S. economy shut down because government and state government and the medical industry can't get it figured out, and have businesses still functioning and open, the U.S. economy is really taking a toll. But in the meanwhile, China has been booming. Their exports have been way up. They were the only economy in the world that was functioning and open since last March, and it's really benefited them. But we are seeing now, it'll be an interesting dynamic to see how it plays out, because the narrative used to be in the U.S. with the states and the masking, right? Is that it was only the redneck states, or it was only them southern states that were the red states that were that were not looking out for the health and the interest of the public. But now we do have Connecticut, which is a blue state, a Democratic-run state that has done exactly the same thing. And they need to, because what have we seen with states that have maintained lockdowns and they haven't really looked at the situation objectively? The economy's really, really been hurt in those cities. The cities themselves have been gutted because people have been leaving. They've had a mass exodus of residents and taxpayers from those states, fleeing and seeking states that are more open. And, that's a trend that I expect will probably continue going forward. And it'll be interesting to see, where the new hubs of innovation come out of the country because of this. Maybe it's not Silicon Valley anymore. It's probably going to be somewhere
Well,
else.
yeah, probably Texas. But it's smart that Connecticut is doing that, right? Because we know that Connecticut for many years have been, doing terribly economically, and people have been leaving in droves out of the state. So now that there's actually an influx of people moving into Connecticut from New York City, I think Connecticut sees it as well. Let's try to take advantage of this so that we could at least do slightly better than not. And so it's good that they're actually doing that. New Jersey should look into doing the same because New York, Jersey is doing terribly. Um, people are just leaving from Jersey. They're moving to Miami like crazy, down to Florida and all of those areas. And if they don't open up in time, they're gonna lose out on a lot of precious, dollars.
Mm.
And so, yeah,
Yeah.
that's the situation, right?
Cool. Well, let's get into it. I think I might hear a little echo in the audio. If anyone's watching, if you hear any echoing, definitely let me know. Mike, it's not on your side. I think it might just be an eCam thing. But let's get into the first topic here then. So you'll see here it's a CNN article from March 5th, 2021, and the article title is China has built the world's largest navy. Now, what's Beijing going to do with it? And you'll see here what CNN is telling us is that China's Navy fleet may have surpassed the U.S. Navy's. The U.S. Office of Naval Intelligence predicted the number of battle force ships in China's Navy would reach 360 by the end of 2020, making it the largest Navy in the world by size. The United States plans to increase its fleet from 297 to 355 battle force ships in the near future. Mike, you and I are both veterans, prior service military, and history does tell us that the nation that has the largest navy historically has been the world power, right?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts initially with this article? And I know you've been covering a lot of this over the last couple weeks here, but what are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are, China, they're actually doing what they're saying. Their goal is by 2049 to be the world superpower. And, they're actually making moves to get to there. So they already have I think by 2025, their goal is to have, it's not just, it's 360 it says there? They're trying to get to four. They're trying to get to 400 by the next 2-3 years. They're trying to make it to 400 battleships, and the United States says that they're trying to make it to, I think, close to 300 maybe.
Mm-hmm.
That's not really good if you're trying to compete in the military arena. And funny, right? Because we spend a lot of money on defense, and we're pretty much slacking on that part. And I think it shows a little bit our weakness that we are not a manufacturing nation like we used to be, even though we have companies like the one out in Connecticut that builds submarines and
Electric boat.
General Dynamic,
Yeah,
Electric Boat, General Dynamic, and all of that. They're lagging when it comes to manufacturing. And I think one of the things that we have to notice is when you want to be a superpower, and let's say we were to be in a war with a superpower, usually that becomes a world war. It's not only a great navy that wins, it's also a country that's able to replenish any losses of machinery like the navy or the military per se. Mm-hmm. So does the United States have the infrastructure to continue to build efficiently quickly? I don't think we are there. I think we've actually gone away from that, and that's a huge weakness. That's a huge strength for China. They're exploiting it for their benefit, which they should, because that's the only way you can be a superpower, and they're actually doing that. And then on top of that, China also has other things put into place in their, plans for domination. They have seaports all over the world
Mm,
that they've actually invested in. So a lot of these countries are in debt to China, which actually then gives China now even more clout to control those ports. So now with a large navy and also this type of Silk Road that they have in the different port cities of the world, they have a lot of flexibility. That, think about this, right? Let's go back to the Soviet Union. Soviet Union was a strong military and a strong power, but it wasn't sophisticated as China is right
mm,
now.
right.
China is moving towards a more sophisticated adversary for the United States. So they see that and they're actually capitalizing on our weaknesses, which is we have withdrawn from many nations around the world. We've done a lot of things to pretty much pull away while shifting our importance to the Middle East. China looked at that and they started to really invest in Africa and South America. And now we're going into Africa, but a lot of time, a lot of these places that we're going into, we've lost ground. So I think we are in a Cold War, and every day that goes by, China becomes stronger and the United States becomes weaker. We owe a lot of money to China. We're highly indebted to them, and I think that's another issue we have. So like I discussed with like other friends too, and I've discussed with you. If you look at the Art of War, the book The Art of War,
Hmm.
and you look at all the rules that it takes to win a war, even before going to war, if you could win before going into war, that's the best aspect here, right? And China is pretty much checking all those boxes for success. United States is doing the opposite. And I think it's because we have corporate interest in the United States exploiting the nation, manipulating the government, and then we have a divide. And we have fragments in this country that has really us fighting each other, and so we're weakened. And if we don't actually come, if we don't unite and build the country back to, let's say, its peak of like in the 50s, the war has been lost even before it started. So that's my opinion. But if you could go and look at the facts and put aside your bias, and your patriotism, and just look at the facts of what's going on right now, we are at the weekend right here.
Yeah, I was trying to find an image or a map of all of the actual seaports that China does own, or they have enough investment into the projects in these ports that they're Chinese owned, and it's staggering. This is something that I'll see if I can find it for one more. It's a big deal because they're seaports equate to shipping, right, which equates to trade. And when we started to see China step into Venezuela and South America, and they took advantage of a lot of the, because this is what they've really done over the last couple of years, is they've taken advantage of economic situations in a certain region, and they'll funnel money in when those countries need the money, and then that is able to allow them to either purchase ports outright, or they have leeway and leverage to be there, and because they're funding projects. And I was when I started to notice that they had really taken advantage of the stuff going on in Venezuela a few years back, not only for signing into oil agreements with Venezuela, but pretty much now having all of the South American ports owned by China. That was a big deal once I saw it come to the Americas, because we know that they own the largest shipping port out of Greece. They were able to purchase that through the Greek financial crisis years ago. We know that they've got the one Silk Road, like we talk about, that they're trying to create. So it seems like while the politics is being played in the West, and while the information is confusing for the people to understand what's going on, China's really been surrounding us all throughout the world, owning all the ports, all the shipping ports, making massive amounts of investment, and I think that the seaports are the big deal. We also know in Antarctica, no, the North Pole.
The North
So
Pole.
the North Pole now, their waterways are actually open and sailable for the first time, and that's a huge dispute that's going on right now as we speak.
Yeah, because now China could use those areas and Russia to actually go around compared to going around like the Suez Canal and
Mm.
pay those taxes or go all the way around Africa. They don't need to do that. Now they could just go around that area, which actually helps China and Russia with transportation and cost.
So one of the things that I expect we would probably see next now is the restriction of flow of trade. You know, the South China Sea is something that we've also talked about a lot because there's a lot of oil tankers, there's a lot of cargo ships that have to move through the South China Sea, and the U.S. has a large presence there right now for that reason to try to keep it stable from what they say, but they're really kind of enclosing in China in that part of the world. Um, I'm wondering. I've always wondered if that's where we would see things really kick off first. Would be in the South China Sea with some type of barricade or blockade of ports or ships coming in and out through that region.
Oh, bro, of course. Like, think of it. You don't. A war's not gonna start or conflict. China's not gonna come and encroach on the United States, or they're not gonna go towards Europe and start pushing. It's gonna be more towards the South China Sea. You have a lot of U.S. control there. You have a lot of U.S. allies. You have South Korea. You have Taiwan. You have Japan. You have the Philippines, Australia, Indonesia. All of those countries there are more Western friendly, right? Per se, they say that. Some of them don't seem to be, but that's up for debate. But if they start to really rub shoulders incorrectly with some of these powers, then the United States has to step in because if they don't, then China will continue to move and move and move. And then if that happens, then there will be conflict with Japan and any of those countries. It's too easy, right? Because
Mm.
China's right there, Japan's right there, South
Right.
Korea's right there, and they all have conflict.
Right.
They have conflict. They're fighting over islands right now, right? And then you have China also building artificial islands on areas that are, waters that are claimed by others. The Philippines has issues with China when it comes to land and some of these islands. And then also you have the issue with Taiwan, which they're scared that they're going to meet the same fate as Hong Kong. And now we go into Hong Kong. China's already saying that they're going to implement a new electing system, and that the system's going to be pretty much what their Pulitzer Bureau, like the Pulitzer Bureau, wants
Hmm.
it to be. So
Yeah. So that's a good segue then into the next article here. China approves plan to veto Hong Kong election candidates. So it says here China's parliament voted overwhelmingly on Thursday for changes to Hong Kong's electoral system, including plans to grant Beijing veto powers over who gets to be nominated and elected to run the Asian financial hub, as leaders move towards a patriotic government after huge pro democracy rallies in the city. So there's
that's a
two.
whole bunch of jargon,
Yeah,
right? It's a bunch of jargon pretty much saying that we're going to implement a system that resembles a democratic system, but literally we're going to put a person that's going to support the one China policy and
right.
whatever China deems in their system. That's all it is.
Yeah, so they've essentially there any type of election is can be vetoed by Beijing, can be vetoed by China. So if China doesn't
Yeah,
want
so
that
what
official
does it
there,
say? This says that China's goal is to have a one China policy, meaning that any territory that China thinks is part of their nation, they're going to incorporate it inside of their system as one. While the rest of the world, is saying that Hong Kong was its own country and Taiwan is its own country, right? The Republic of China, they call themselves. They're saying no. And they're already going with what they said they were going to do. And they went into Hong Kong and they did exactly what they wanted to do. And nobody stopped it. So what the world showed China is like, hey, we won't do anything. We will complain and cry, but it's no different than what, Nazi Germany did when they
hmm
went into the Rhineland, right? It's the same
right,
thing.
right,
The world didn't do anything. And,
right,
after World War One, there was treaties set in place, right? And the treaty was pretty much Germany You can't have any of this land back. And you can't do this X, Y, and Z. And Germany went and did it, and nobody did anything. The
Right.
French didn't do anything. England didn't do anything. In the same situation we have again. So now China did that with Hong Kong, and now China has its sights on Taiwan. Taiwan's very scared right now, and so the United States have sent bombers and everything to posture, but I think China knows that the United States is not going to do anything.
Yeah, this
They're
is
not. They're
yeah.
not. Biden already talked the other day. They're not. They're not even complaining about the whole Uyghur situation and northwestern China with the concentration camps or re-education camps or whatever you want to call it.
Hmm.
They're not pushing back the same way we saw when people on the Democrats complained about Russia, and they put sanctions on Russia and everything about a bunch of things that they were alluding to that Russia was doing. But now China's doing things that are even more aggressive, and we're not pushing back at all. So
It's interesting too because the Russians are close allies with China, right? So you'd
yeah,
imagine that if it would be one, they would be combined, really. But no, but we've talked about this though. The idea again. What does this look like going forward? Is it a traditional conflict of world powers that leads to some type of conflict and military action, or is it like the two times in histories with the Thucydides trap, which we'll talk about next in the next article, where it was a handover that was peaceful? So is it going to be a peaceful handover like the Biden administration and the suits and the technocrats and the business elites handing things over, milking the U.S. economy as much as they can, and then not really caring what happens here because it's the new China world now, and we have our business ties to them? Or do we still see a patriotic fight for the homeland, which would bring some type of armed conflict? I'd imagine if the U.S. is going to try to maintain its position as a world power. That's something that I'm wondering. What I did find interesting with this article is that Hong Kong is the financial center. We know that Hong Kong is like the finance hub for the Asia Pacific region, and also all the Chinese money too, right? So like all the Chinese money was going through Hong Kong, like it was almost being laundered through Hong Kong,
yeah.
or
So it was a
that's what I
money
was.
look between Hong Kong and Macau. That was a money laundering system, but it was
Mm-hmm.
not. The thing is, it was not a Chinese money laundering system. It was more of a Western money laundering system. And then, the Chinese was once it started to gain more and more power, then it became more of a battleground between, hey, this is going to be our money laundering system, and that's pretty much what it is. That's why London and New York lost out on Hong Kong. And that's why they're focusing more on Singapore now. Singapore is more of that hub, and it became a hub. But now with this situation, now it's becoming more so.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Um,
Cool.
and then going back to what you just said, Joe, about what is going to happen. Is there going to be like a handoff, or will there be a war? I think it all depends on the monetary system and our financial system and our economy.
Mm-hmm.
If our economy collapses, the dollar collapses, then there will be internal strife, and that could lead to a number of things. It could be a civil war. It could just there could be a total collapse, and it could even become that the United States breaks up.
Mm.
That could always happen. People don't think
Right.
that could happen. There's a bunch of stuff that people never thought that could happen, and it has happened.
Yeah, especially
So
since the U.S. is ending this 200 plus year cycle of a world power, right? Like the Rome, we know the British Empire. A lot of these empires, it's under 300 years or something like that, right? Like 260 to
yeah,
300 plus years, and we're approaching this end of a longer term cycle where that's also happening here, and this also ties into the politics, like we've talked about, like and people in the U.S. can already feel it after the last election. We always hear, will there be more? Will there be more than just Democrats and Republicans? Will there be more now? Will the political system fraction? And what will that do for states? Will it be united 50 states again? Or will it look more like tribes where there's separation between different states? So it'll.
probably look at right. The Soviet Union broke up, and what happened? When Rome
Right.
collapsed, the whole Roman Empire didn't collapse. Rome divided itself, right? You had the Roman idea because of the church was centered in Rome, but the power structure was divided between Milan and Constantinople.
Mm.
And then you had Western Roman Empire and Eastern Roman Empire. What happened? It collapsed and it divided itself into two. The one that was focused in Italy, that's the one that really vanished. The stronger one, which was the one in Turkey, right? The
Hmm.
Eastern Roman Empire in Constantinople, it became its own thing. And
Right.
then from there, it collapsed and it was taken over by the Muslims, and
Hmm.
then later on became the Ottoman Empire. So what
Right.
happened there, right? It
Right.
broke into two. One huge empire broke into two, and then it just completely vanished. That's how that happened.
Right.
And
Right.
then Soviet Union, the same thing. This is where we have to be careful if we want to maintain the republic.
Yeah.
The problem is that the republic has become more of a corporatism system that actually is weakening the republic.
Mm.
And then that allows for an adversary to really exploit it and fracture it even more to the point that it collapses within itself. And then when it collapses within itself, then there is no adversary, right?
Right.
Because then that's the way that a country like China could come in and just be like, hey, it destroyed itself. And that's
Hmm.
why I say the art of war says you allow the enemy to collapse. How do you do that? You use subversion, you exploit its weaknesses. If you could do all of that without actually sending troops over or shooting a bullet, that's how you win a war.
Mm.
The
Yeah.
best way to win a war. And that looks like what's happening, man.
And that's kind of the ironic thing about what's happened with this virus as well, is that you had the U.S. dollar and the U.S. economy that we all knew was inflated massively, and it was just waiting for one little piece of instability for it to pop. And the virus came at the perfect time, and that's what's super controversial right now. Again, the U.S. economy's been shut down for a year. China's bounced back massively, and now the dollar. This is done for this is the nail in the coffin for the dollar, because what happens to the dollar out of this? Hyperinflation, like we talk about, or early inflation, like we're seeing right now, which leads to the demise of the dollar, the demise as the U.S. as holding the reserve currency of the world, and a shattering of the U.S. economic system. Whereas China's booming, right? China's booming. But we've seen so through these two articles, we've seen that China now has control of the financial system essentially in the Asia Pacific region. They have the largest military in the world. They own all the shipping ports around the world. And what does this lead to? The next article here, which is titled "China's Military Must Spend More to Meet U.S. War Threat." The second in command of the armed forces of China says the country must prepare for the Thucydides trap. So, what is the Thucydides trap? The Thucydides trap is the idea that conflict is inevitable when one power rises to displace a great one. So essentially, what the Thucydides trap is when there's an existing world power, the U.S. in this case, and a rising world power, China in this case, there's a trap, a natural conflict that happens with this change of powers. And I believe two times in history, this transition of world power has been peaceful. There hasn't been any conflict. But I believe the 17 or 18 other times that it's happened, there has been conflict there. The last time that this would have happened, would have been, I believe, pre World War II. I think when Britain was ending its reign as a superpower, a lot of that conflict was going on at that time. Rising world powers competing against existing world powers.
Yeah,
But
World War One and Two are pretty much odd factors when it comes to that theory because they were multitudes of nations that were vying for power with combinations of others, and that's why the United States and Russia never went to war was because of Germany. Germany was like the rising power, and then you had Soviet Union as a rising power, and all three at the same time, right? And
yeah,
so because of Germany, that became the enemy of one is my enemy. That didn't come from that situation. So the only way I see that not happening right now
is if there was an oddball that came out of nowhere, and then something would become more of a Soviet Union situation where
Right.
there's two existing superpowers, because we had two existing superpowers just up till 1991.
Right.
But right now there doesn't seem to be, because everyone keeps talking about Russia, but I'm sorry, Russia just doesn't have the economy to compete as a superpower. It just doesn't. It's
Right.
just like, it's like an Eastern England. It's like Great Britain. Great Britain lost its supremacy in World War I. After that, it was a weak country. It still has some power, but it's not a superpower. That's where Russia stands. Right now,
Right.
it's just China and the United States.
And you see, they even say here China's foreign minister Wang Yi warned on Sunday that the United States should not cross China's red lines, such as Taiwan. But he also said Beijing was willing to work with Washington on pandemic control, economic recovery, and climate change. So it sounds like what it sounds like to me is China, quote, we are going to do what we want to do. We know that we are going to be the next world power. We are going to do what we're going to do, and you're not going to get in our way. U.S., quote, okay, sounds good. As long as we could have a piece of that pie in the future with some money and some investments, we're already fucking our people over. We're already fucking over the American people as it was. We've been gutting those motherfuckers for a long time. So we're gonna let you do what you want, China. We're gonna let you do what you want, China. But as long as we get some of that money there, and China's over here like China. Oh, we know how to deal with Westerners. Sounds good. Yeah, sounds good.
Yep, money. Yeah, the person you're quoting, or what the U.S. that you're quoting, that's the microphone, or the loudspeaker of the corporation speaking, and the politicians speaking on behalf of the corporations. That's what that's pretty much what's happening.
Yeah,
That's what exactly. And then the American people are just subjects. We're just subjects. We don't want that to happen. We want us to continue to be a world leader, and we want a republic that is fair for all people in this country. That's what we want. We want something that's fair and equitable, and we want to be a leading nation and have a true democracy. But what's happening on the sidelines is the complete opposite. We're having a corporatist nation controlled by corporations on behalf of government, and literally selling out to the next superpower. And the only reason that's happening is because corporations don't have allegiances. They don't have allegiance to a country. They're multinational. They came up with that system of a corporation for these same reasons, to be continual. They run in perpetuity. Does not matter who's in power, as long as that nation that's in power, or that superpower that is in power, allows that corporation to operate. That's what happens here. So we are a jumping off point as a country for these corporations to continue on to become bigger and bigger. And you know what? These corporations that work together in the background, they're only using China as another stepping off point. That's all they're doing. Because the only reason why China has been able to get to where they're at is because of people like Henry Kissinger back in the 70s, and Nixon, that allowed them to come into the economy and let the corporations go and exploit their nation, and then put them into that power play. And then we have a bunch of other things that you could look into that these powerful people have allowed them to do. So
yeah, and I think they came into the World Trade Organization in 2001, China, right? And that was actually, I think that was Biden run, Biden assisted at that time. I believe
of course, that's why there's the conflict with his son.
He's
There's a bunch of stuff there.
He's famous for people addressing him at that time, talking about the risks of China being competitive in this nature. And he's famous for saying, "Come on, man, they're not gonna eat our lunch." Here we are,
bro. Biden, the Chinese helped Biden get into power. That's what happened. And nobody wants to fucking talk about it, and they want to call it a conspiracy theory and all of that. But Biden is their best friend. Biden is their best friend because Biden is too vested into China to even do anything against them. He has to. They have power over him. So he has to do what they want. At the same time, he's trying to maneuver whatever the corporations want. And that's the play that they have right now. and nobody wants to admit it, but that's what's going on, which is why we don't stand against any policies that we have against them. And this is not to talk bad about the people of China, but the government, they're doing what's best for them. They're not doing what's best for us. We, as our country, we need to do what's best for us, and we can't give an inch to them, because an inch that we give is worth 3 times to them than what it is worth to us. So,
yeah, I agree. And again, going back to the last paragraph here, from the economic perspective, China fully understands they've pretty much got the U.S. from the economy. He says China was already rising in economic power, saying the country's GDP was equivalent to more than 70% of the U.S. economy. This means we are already standing on the key position of a new chapter towards strength. So what this means is, again, GDP is gross domestic product. It's the size of a nation's economy, how big their economy is. And China's was already equivalent to more than 70% of the U.S. So
they're winning economically. And on top, look, they're doing everything that we're doing wrong. They're doing it right. And not only that, they're trying to take as many people as they can out of poverty, which is what America doesn't do. So that makes them even stronger.
Right.
And then on top of that, if you go and Google, China is trying to masculate their men, like they're trying to make them more macho, and they're going to implement these policies in their school system. That just shows that they're looking at us, that we're trying to take away the masculinity of our society and of our men, right? That's what we're doing in America. Mm-hmm. They're doing the opposite, and they're building up their men to be even more masculine, because they're trying to build up their generation, that new generation. Remember, their goal is that by 2049 to be the world leading superpower. That means that there's 28 years to get to that point. That's a whole generation of men right there. If you can make that generation of men be at its strongest, now you have a total strong fighting force. While we are pretty much breaking down and emasculating our men, right? To a point that if we ever have to fight against an adversary, we won't be able to. Because we have a weakened society, a weakened set of men that don't even know they're men. All right? And this goes into other issues that could get really touchy. Right. But let me just leave it at that, and you figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we won't speak out for the military nowadays. I think you and I got out of the military at that turning point of, like, when it was, still hardcore, you instilled all, the masculinity and the violence of action. And then around, like, the after 2010 or so, it started really kind of, you started seeing stress cards come out in basic training, and even the chain of command really being lenient on soldiers. And even now, I think that for the military now compared to where it was 20 years ago in the U.S., it's not. I don't think they're as violent as they were. Unfortunately, I have to say that, as we were 20 years ago.
Oh yeah, back then it was very aggressive, like basic training. Like it was. You have to worry if the drill sergeant might hit you.
Yeah.
Now drill sergeants can't even curse. What is that? And I know it sounds like, whatever. You want to say whatever you want to say, but it's different when you have a military and you build them to be something. You just have to do it in a certain way. And when it comes down to it, you have a country like China that's trying to do the most they can to build a strong, tough society. And we're doing the opposite. So what does that say? That says a lot. Maybe that's why all of this is happening. Maybe there's some subversion going on in the background that people don't understand. And it's probably part of, this is the best type of trick you could play. You want that to happen. If it's me against you, you have a team and I have a team, I'm going to do whatever it is in my power to weaken your team. And the best way to do it is not only through force, it's through subversion. It's through intellect. It's all of those ways. So, and right now, I think there's some things going on that the United States is saying, well, they're going to start cracking down on Confucius institutes and the universities, because they think those are places that indoctrination is happening. So that's interesting that that's going on. Confucius Institutes are all over the United States and all types of universities and
Yep.
and all of that. So that's going on, man.
Yeah. The next article here ties into another thing that we've seen, and this is Microsoft's latest hack. So Microsoft's big email hack, what happened, who did it, and why it matters. On March 2nd, Microsoft said there were vulnerabilities in its Exchange server mail and calendar software for corporate and government data centers. The vulnerabilities go back 10 years and have been exploited by Chinese hackers at least since January. So the group, which Microsoft has dubbed Hafeman, had aimed to gain information from defense contractors, schools, and other entities in the U.S., according to a blog post by Microsoft VP Tom Burt. The hack could lead companies to spend more on security software and adopting cloud-based email instead of running their own email servers. So this is an extension in my mind from what we've already seen a few years back, which was that they found out that motherboards of all of these computers that had been coming from China for years now had a small little microscopic chip that was, I remember the image was on someone's fingertip and it was really small. And these were found on government computers, DoD laptops, and this was from China. And now we're seeing it again, this data, the information that they've been able to mine this entire time, which is valuable. This paints a picture for everything. There is no, when you have access to this kind of information, you might as well be working there and looking at the computer screens themselves. So, this in my mind now, it's just a cherry on top of, how do you avoid the Chinese at this point if they know everything about you? They have all your data. They own all the shipping ports, right? They're building up the military.
Bro, they're like
DOD
they're the drug.
information.
Bro, we are the crack addict. The United States and the whole world, we're the crack addicts, and they are the crack dealer. All right. They own all the manufacturing systems, right? They build iPhones. They build the computers. They build every component for every type of product there is in the world. And we want it, and we want it now, and we want it cheap. All right? How can you how can you stop a society like ours from desiring that so much? Right? Because the only reason why that market exists there is because there's a huge demand. And we can't stop that demand. It's almost impossible. And China knows that. And that's why they could put those little things inside of freaking motherboards. Because we're not going to stop buying motherboards. We don't know what the hell's in this iPhone. These iPhones, they come from China. We don't know what you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like, all of this it's ridiculous when you really look at it from a macro sense. But when you understand the way the psyche of a human works, and how we are and how we actually, we talk right now all this smack, but right now when there's a product, let's say a new iPhone comes in or a new, whatever it is, we go and buy it. We don't care if it comes from China or from Vietnam or whatever. We don't care. Honestly, our dollar says it all. Where, if we stop spending that dollar on things that are against our own interest, then things might change, but we don't do that.
Yeah. So do you think the fall of the U.S. empire will come down to almost greed at the end of the day, right? Would it be greed? Of
course, definitely. That's why you have a system like China that's a communist system, one-party system, that actually incorporates capitalism within it, and it's the best way to exploit the world if they understand how to work these numbers, right? They know how to do it. They learned from the best, which are the Americans. We were the best capitalists, right? And every mistake that we've done, they've looked at it, they study it, and they make sure they don't commit it. And if there is, that mistake is to actually happen, they already have fail safes. They understand they're highly sophisticated, and they're just on another level. They're not like the Russians were back in the Soviet Union times. Soviets, they were, we thought they were scary, but I think it's because it was propaganda to just make us, to allow us to keep building our military, and so we don't complain about all this shit. But the Soviets, they weren't sophisticated at all. The Chinese, though, Bro, these people got it down, man.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
got it down.
It's so good. It's so
They're
good.
yo, I give them props, man. I'm
Yeah,
sorry, I can't hate on them.
yeah.
It's not their, it's our fault. This is not this, what is, you're gonna blame somebody that is more hungrier than you? They're hungrier than us, bro. When
Hey,
we break it down, if it was a hustler, they're the most sophisticated hustler, bro.
it's the
We're over here freaking in the sun tanning, living it up like we won. We won the game. Like no, the game isn't over. While you're over here just just relaxing, kicking back, they're over there working, bro. They're hustling. They're hustling.
as Biden would say, "Come on, man.
Come on, man.
They ain't gonna take our lunch. Those Chinese don't know nothing. We just want them to make our cheap. Don't you want cheapest stuff?" That's how it works, bro. That's how it works. Isn't that funny though? It's always complacency, right? Complacency kills at the end of the day.
Yes, we've been
That's
very
true.
complacent.
That's true. And speaking of killing, I think it's a good next segue here to an RT article on the war machine. So the war machine's back. Biden reminded of previous criticism of Trump's escalation in Syria after he orders a new strike. So this was ironic.
Bro, they won't let up on Syria, man. I'm telling you, they will not let up on Syria. It's crazy. They just won't, man.
What is it about Syria?
It comes down to oil at the end of the day. It comes back to oil. You know, Syria is just that. It's that door that opens up the east to the west. It's that last important door. If you're able to take that and have the key to that door, the floodgates open. That's where the money's at. Because then Europe is completely opened from the Middle East and Asia all the way through. And that's the battleground. That's why Russia is like holding it, because Russia and Syria, they're tightest. Russia's only like strong ally, even back in the Soviet times and in World War II, was Syria. That's where they had their only naval base outside of Russia, was in Syria, and they're trying to keep that because Russia knows that if they lose it, Russia's completely fucked. Russia, they're screwed. And and it's from an aspect of power, it does seem like it would be a benefit to us, which it would be. Not to us I think more to like corporations and the powers, but
Right.
I think we're putting so much effort on that. Literally, we're spreading ourselves. We're putting all this energy in the Middle East, like always. Meanwhile, China's doing what they're doing in the South Pacific, and then we have other issues down in like Africa and South America. We're spread too thin, man, and we don't have the money to support any of this. Going back to the art of war, bro. In the art of war, it says, when you have to always take an account to your finances. If you go into a war and you can't afford it, you go into foreign lands and you put, they call it like, carts and horses and all of that, carriages. That's what they call them, like in the book. If you have too much of that and you can't afford it, you will lose the war. And that's where we're at. Look, we're spending, how much money are we spending right now bombing Syria when we can't afford anything, bro? We have a stimulus check going out of
Right.
what, $1.9 trillion that we cannot afford.
Right.
We can't afford.
And we've seen this historically with world powers failing because of that, right? The Roman Empire, it was debt over expansion, debt. Even
The
Germany,
British Empire.
yeah, even Germany had to finance World War II with its currency, which led to hyperinflation, which led to the destruction of the currency, right? So I mean, we're at that point now. We know the U.S. now. It's our debt to GDP ratio is like 105%. So we have more debt in 1 year than we make out of goods and services. So we are no longer a solvent nation. It's a nation now operating off of debt. So
And these debts are coming due, and they're coming due. And meaning that if they're coming due, right, these bills are starting to come into the United States saying, you need to pay this amount of interest already. We can't afford that. So you know what they're going to do? They're going to print more money to pay that, which is the same thing that happened in Germany after World War I in 1920. They started to do the same thing, and then they start to print to pay these bills, and we print ourselves to death. and then you're gonna start seeing that we need like $100 just to buy a bottle of water. That's how hyperinflation happens, folks. This is what we have right now.
But you, as the viewer, might be confused on that because I think by the time it gets that bad, the propaganda in the U.S. is going to be so hardcore that people are going to be like, well, that's $100 because of global warming, or it's because the Washington Post had an article like this past week that was saying you might see prices start rising, but it's a necessary dilemma for us to restart the economy again. Right? There's propaganda like that where it's like,
do it, bro. They've been doing this shit for years.
They've morphed it, but what everyone watching needs to understand is that your prices are rising because of the amount of inflation. Like, yes, there might be a supply chain issue in some of these goods or services, but it's the money creation. It's the $1.9 trillion stimulus package. It's the debt that we talked about. The U.S.
Bro, the
now
definition
has more debt than GDP.
Yeah, the definition of inflation's been changed for so long. The definition of inflation back in the 1920s pretty much meant, the devaluation of a currency. And then they went and they changed the definition to be called that it's just the cost of goods sold has increased. So they used to always blame, it's because oil went up in price that all the prices have gone up. It's like, well, there's a small reason for that. Yeah, it's the issue of oil, but oil is actually tacked onto the petrodollar.
Yeah.
So, when you start peeling the onion, you start to really see what's the issue here. And the issue here is the currency ain't worth shit.
Yeah.
You need more money to buy one product.
In the dollar, I think one of the last points with the Syria stuff, to go back when I asked, like, why Syria, Mike, and you said oil, and the petrodollar is probably all about that. This is probably what it's about that we're talking about. So for viewers that don't know, the petrodollar, all oil that's traded in the world today, any oil that's traded around the world, it's actually traded in the U.S. dollar. It's called the petrodollar. And this was Bush Sr., right, signed it with the Saudis, and they made an agreement with OPEC that the dollar would be the currency that oil is transacted in. And that's arguably why we've been in the Middle East for so long. When you hear about, it's for oil, some people don't know the background of the petrodollar, so there's some confusion there. But it's the fact that the U.S. has a lot on the line with oil, because if for some reason the oil as the commodity that powers all machines, all the economy, if that no longer is traded in the dollar doesn't exist. The dollar doesn't have any relevance anymore. The petrodollar is probably one of the only pieces of relevance that the dollar has left in the world today. So
yeah, the only reason why the dollar has value is because of the importance of it being used in circulation. So the Federal Reserve gets that power and gets that benefit. So does the U.S. government of dollars being circulated and being used as that main currency. That's why you see a lot of countries throughout the world adopt the U.S. dollar. Because if they adopt the U.S. dollar, that means that they need to use the dollar for exchanges, which gives it more value. And that's why we had issues with Iraq back in 1999 when Saddam Hussein said, "Hey, I'm not trading oil anymore in dollars. I'm going to trade it in euros." And when he did that, that's when we started to prop our military up to go and pretty much eliminate him. And then back in 2009, Gaddafi said the same thing, that he didn't want to trade his oil in US dollars. He wanted to create his own currency amongst the African nations. And what happened? The same fate as Saddam Hussein. The same fate happened. And it has happened to many countries. They face the same issues because it is super important for the United States to maintain power. So in a way, United States needs to probably, yes, be maybe in Syria and try to, pose dominance so that petrodollar continues to have power if it wants to continue to be a superpower. So it's probably the last string that the United States is probably holding on to for dominance. Right. But then what happens when the dollar collapses and the dollar isn't valuable? Other countries won't want to hold dollars to trade and buy oil, which is needed. They need, for any country to buy oil, they need to first go and purchase US dollars to go and then buy oil. But if there's no value, and if every day the value of the dollar inflates, right, it loses value, then a country won't want to buy U.S. dollars because they're just gonna lose money. Because when there's hyperinflation, the dollar would lose, or any currency loses every second. There's a fluctuation. So like right now, a perfect example, if you want to learn a little bit more about this, go look at Lebanon. Every day, Lebanon has a different they have charts that are set up to show how much their currency has inflated or deflated. And one day, you know, something could cost something, and then half a day later, it fluctuates. So they're always trying to convert their money into another currency like the dollar or Bitcoin, because it's a huge risk.
Right.
And if that happens with the U.S. dollar, countries will not want to trade in dollars to get oil. And then that's when a country like China could come in and be like, hey, you know, we have our currency and it's stabilized. That's when you have wars that could happen.
We're right around the corner. We're right around the corner. Better get rid of them dollars. You don't want them dollars anymore. You don't want those dollars. You don't want to be last in the line holding those dollars when they drop it for oil and they drop it for all that other stuff. You better be making sure you're listening to us, or you're buying some Bitcoin, some Bitcoin or some Monero or some of that other crypto or something tangible. Because, man, it's going to get crazy up in here. Shit.
Or an NFT. Go get some
NFTs. NFT. Oh, man, dude. You got time for the last article, Mike, or what are you thinking here?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, cool. This was because we talked about credit, we talked about debt, right? So, final article from Yahoo Finance: Biden wants to shut down credit bureaus. What that would mean for you? So, one of the most fascinating platform items in the Biden presidential campaign was the idea of transferring consumer ratings from Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion to a public registry under the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. What does this mean? This means that
they want to centralize credit and have government control over it.
Okay, yeah, because like right now, if I was to search up my credit score, right, online, I'd be going to one of these credit bureaos. And
yeah, there's three main ones, right? Equifax and TransUnion.
Yep.
And
so
they are trying to pretty much say that, you know, they're very inefficient. We don't know how they calculate it. So this is what the defense for having it centralizing government. Their defense is that these three bureaus, there's no understanding of how they calculate our credit, and because of that, billions of dollars are lost for consumers because of issues with errors and miscalculations maybe and a bunch of stuff. And so the government thinks that maybe centralizing it will pretty much, they're able to then have more transparency. I don't know. It's hard to say because the government, government's so inefficient. How would they even do this correctly? But, they have some truth with what they're saying, that the three credit bureaus, we don't freaking know how they calculate any of this shit. So, they don't work for us. They work for the banks. Right?
Right.
So there is something there that I think people need to really scrutinize this and talk to the congressman and congresswoman and figure what's the best option for this, because, this is an issue. This is an issue that we do have.
One of the things that I'm wanting to see play out is the merger of these credit scores, so traditional credit scores, to now these new type of social credit scores that we're seeing being done in places like China or all around the world. Like in the U.S. now, we've already seen that encryption's the enemy. The FBI and the government doesn't want any encrypted applications anymore. The encryption is important for your any application online because it prevents someone from snooping into your private messages and your comments and your chats and stuff. So we're already seeing the government wanting to rip away all of those encryptions, your privacy rights, so that they can scan and read messages and see, what kind of individual are you? Are you anti-government? Are you pro-government? Are you anti-banks? Are you pro-banks? And these new credit score structures are definitely going to be rolled together. So if you're like in China right now, if you're someone that has a social credit score that might be anti-government, that could prevent you from opening up bank accounts. It could prevent you from traveling outside the country, getting passports. So the centralization of the credit information in the U.S. is really interesting, though, to see us going towards this now centralized model at the same time period that we're looking to roll out a digital currency, and we're looking to probably start judging people based on what they're posting online. So more to come on this, I guess.
Yep.
Cool, man. All right, so I'm gonna bring us back here to the regular screen. That wasn't bad. So that was good. I know your time. We're trying to get you in and out tonight. Thanks for jumping on, anyways. I think it's good. These Thursday night editions are pretty good here. So I think this is going to be it. If everyone has liked what you have seen, we still have a few people live. Thank you for watching us the entire time. But if you haven't already subscribed to our email newsletter, you can head over to thenonconformist.io. That is thenonconformist.io, and you can just plug in your email right here on our homepage, and you will get all of our content sent directly to your email inbox. If you haven't been following us for the last 1.5 to 2 years, you should. A lot of the topics that we've talked about have been, we talk about topics here before they really happen in real life. I mean, we've seen plenty of it by now. And our goal is to really prepare people for the future, prepare people for what's to come. And, the nonconformist was fitting because if you had really conformed to a lot of the social norms of today and you're listening to just mainstream news outlets, you're not really able to profit off of that. You aren't. You really miss the boat after it's left. And a lot of things that we talk about, a lot of the topics that we talk about are really trying to get you ahead of the curve so you can profit from things before they actually happen. So definitely subscribe to the newsletter. Let us know in the comment section what you think. And I think that's going to be it for today, Mike.
Yeah, I think that's good. We had a good conversation, so.
Cool, man.
Awesome, guys. We'll talk to you next week, guys. Stay tuned.
All right, y'all.
Follow us at thenonconformist.io. Peace.
Peace.